Another rough week for the rand, and across our northern border, Zimbabweans are reportedly shunning our currency. That's just one of the reasons why there's an acute shortage of dollars in Zimbabwe. The demand for dollars is so high that ATMs have been running dry, and Zimbabwe has introduced limits on the number of dollars that can leave. Now the Reserve Bank is saying this week it will soon introduce bond notes, which will be a Zimbabwean form of the US dollar, will share a value with the US dollar. There are already so-called bond coins in circulation. Zimbabwe ditched its own currency in 2009 after years of hyperinflation. Since then, Zimbabweans have been using the dollar as well as other foreign currencies, including the rand and the Chinese yuan. Well, to discuss, we're joined by the co-author of When Money Destroys Nations, Philip Haslam. Great to have you with us in studio, Philip. The last time you were here, we were looking back on those years of hyperinflation. That's what your book is about.
Yes.
And there were these huge queues. Now we're seeing queues again for different reasons. Can you explain as simply as possible what is going on?
Okay, it goes all the way back to the end of hyperinflation that you mentioned in 2009. The government was printing money on a massive scale. And by the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, no one wanted to use the currency. And the currency crashed out of use, and people began to trade in US dollars. They literally would import boxes of US dollar notes into the country to be able to trade, to import goods and services, and it became the de facto currency. South African rands also were traded in Zimbabwe during that time. It was very difficult because the government couldn't print any more money when it needed to. Which made it very difficult for the banks. It couldn't bail out any of the banks when it needed to. And so there was a lot of pressure on the currency and banking system in Zimbabwe. One of the things that was very unique is that because there were these notes floating around, particularly US dollar notes, you couldn't get any smaller denominations than $1 US. Okay, so what did you do when you got to the shops and you had to buy something for $3.5 US? So it was a bit of a dilemma, and the government came up with an ingenious plan. They said, we're going to bring in what we call bond coins. These are just literally coins that are change in US dollars. And if you want to get US dollars, you can go to the bank and redeem those, use those coins to get US dollars. But it was at the time when it came out in December in 2014, I said, watch. They're going to use this as a backdoor to try and reintroduce their currency. Okay.
Do you believe that's what's happening now? Because we had the bond coins, now government's saying we will have bond notes in a matter of weeks, months. Is this an attempt to reintroduce the currency?
It's absolutely an attempt to reintroduce the currency. They're being very smart about it. They're introducing it quite slowly. When bond coins initially came out, no one accepted them. They saw them for the joke that they were, as in these are coupons that the government are issuing, and we've seen what that looked like in hyperinflation. So up until December of this last year, people were using rands for change. So they would pay in US dollars, and if they needed extra change, they'd receive rands. But suddenly with the drop in the exchange rate, people no longer wanted to receive rands, and so they began to use these bond coins at the beginning of this year.
Are these bond coins and notes going to be backed by US dollars? I don't understand exactly how it works, because the Zimbabwean government is saying this isn't a new currency. Each of these will be backed by something and the equivalent of one US
Yes, so
dollar.
it's how currency develops, is that people begin to rely on the fact that it's got a backing of some form, and in Zim it does have the backing of a US dollar. So if you want to exchange them for US dollars, you typically can. They're making it quite difficult. Obviously, they want to try and encourage people to use bond notes. But this is something that typically happens as an economy begins to accept, in this case, bond notes. The government then has the ability to stop backing those notes with dollars and increase the supply of those notes. which is really what they want to do in the long run.
This sounds very ominous because of the hyperinflation in Zimbabwe in the past. So what you're saying right now is the government will only produce enough notes to match what it has in reserve. But down the line, it may change its mind. Is that dangerous because of what we've seen in Zimbabwe?
Well, certainly from my perspective, it's a dangerous thing. You never really want to give a government the ability to print money on a large scale. But it's certainly the way the system is designed around the world, and we're seeing countries around the world printing money on a large scale. So Zimbabwe certainly isn't unique, but it's certainly a caution. I mean, the one thing that Zimbabwe has going for it is that its population has already experienced hyperinflation before. And so as soon as the government begin to print more amounts of money relative to the amount of dollars they actually hold, people will begin to reject it quite quickly, rather than what you see in other countries.
Well, what is the alternative? Because if Zimbabwe stays with the US dollar, say it doesn't even print these notes, we've seen the shortages. The central bank has no control, really. I know it's not great to print money, but we're seeing it all around the world. At least reserve banks have some control over supply. So does it have to go this way, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yes, I mean, it's a great question with sort of a lot of views from different economists. But essentially, the banking system operates where they go into a lot of debt, and they are very exposed to what we call a run on the banks. And so globally around the world, as banks have had crises, the government has responded and printed money and given it to the banks to bail them out. However, what we've said in our book, in our study of Zimbabwe's hyperinflation, is that actually that's not a great alternative. Sending a country down an inflationary path has some very, very negative consequences on an economy and on the long run. In the long run, and sometimes it's better to let poor businesses go under and but just face the consequences of poor business decisions that the market has made.
Okay, so it could work if the Reserve Bank is cautious, if the government is cautious and says we'll put a certain amount in supply and stop it there. Unlikely in Zimbabwe is what you're hinting at. Yeah. Just looking at the problem with dollars right now. People want dollars, they don't want the rand. Do you think there's some resentment? I heard from the finance minister of Zimbabwe that the weak rand is actually helping South Africa. Our exports to Zimbabwe become so cheap, wiping out a lot of manufactured goods there. Is there an argument to that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly a big problem in Zim because most of their goods and services are imported from other countries. So they actually have to pay for that using foreign currency. They're trying to stimulate, quote unquote, stimulate their local export markets. They're doing a very, very poor job. What they need to do is liberalize markets, get the government out of the whole sort of process of the economy. So on the one hand, with the rand weakening, the imports into Zimbabwe have become much cheaper. And on the other hand, those imports then make it less profitable for locals to develop their own goods and services.
And apparently a lot of people wanting to exchange rands for dollars at the border, then the government putting in these restrictions on dollars. Why would business, because this is the claim, that people are moving dollars out of the country en masse. Is there a motive for that?
Look, it's not exactly clear that the government are restricting local currency dealers. What they're doing is they're restricting the money that you can take out of the banks. So typically what happens in the Zimbabwe banking system is people will deposit money into the banks, and then the banks will lend out multiple times more than they actually have on hand. Okay, and so they're really exposed. If everyone wants to come and take their money, they actually don't have that money because they've lent out more than they actually have. And so the government has now started putting restrictions on the ability of people to withdraw their money from the banking system. So it's shortages of money in the banking system.
And damaging to a lot of businesses, they are saying. We have to leave it there, but thank you for clarifying this whole situation. You brought in this very shoddy looking US dollar, and next time I guess we'll see it replaced by this bond note, and we'll follow what happens in Zimbabwe. That was the co-author of When Money Destroys Nations, Philip Haslam.